Tonight, decision day in elections across the country, but right now, all eyes are on Virginia. The state's governor's race neck and neck in what's expected to be an early indicator for next year's midterms and beyond. Democrats were looking to secure an early victory in the state that President Biden won by 10 points. But the Republican candidate and political newcomer, Glenn Youngkin, has gained momentum over the last few weeks. Chuck Todd and Kristen Welker joining Top Story Live with new reporting and the latest exit polls. Also breaking tonight, Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11 clearing a critical hurdle. Shots could start going into arms in just a matter of hours. What parents need to know. Cargo crime, shipping containers ransacked, thousands of boxes emptied and ditched along railroad tracks after a rash of break-ins on trains that were supposed to help clear a major backlog at U.S. ports. This as Americans face mass shortages and shipping delays. Plus, the NFL star facing felony DUI charges tonight. Raiders wide receiver Henry Ruggs accused of driving drunk and causing this fiery crash that killed at least one person. The statement just released from the league. Free fall escape, the shocking new video of a suspect crashing a stolen van, then jumping off a bridge to escape deputies. How he was finally taken into custody on the water. And Jetpack mystery, the series of Jetpack sightings thousands of feet over Los Angeles. The new images leading authorities to a new theory. Top Story starts right now. And good evening, I'm Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story with election nights across the country. But the focus tonight, right now, on the hotly contested governor's race in Virginia, expected to have major implications for next year's midterms and even the 2024 presidential election. Democrat and former Governor Terry McAuliffe looking to reclaim office in a state that President Biden won by 10 points just a year ago. But he's now neck and neck with Republican challenger and political newcomer Glenn Youngkin, who has tried to separate himself from former President Trump. Early reporting suggesting voters there are turning out in big numbers as they decide on the first major election of Biden's presidency. An NBC News exit poll showing this: the economy is the most important issue to Virginians right now, with education not too far behind. NBC News political director Chuck Todd and White House chief correspondent Kristen Welker are standing by for us. But let's get right to Katie Beck, who leads us off tonight from Virginia.
On Election Day in Virginia, the candidates for governor in a dead heat. A Republican victory means flipping a state President Biden won by 10 points.
What can happen tomorrow will be a statement that will be heard across this country.
The race seen as a referendum on President Biden, whose approval rating has dropped to 42%. 71% of Americans think the U.S. is on the wrong track. It hasn't stopped former Virginia governor and Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe from bringing Biden on the campaign trail. Biden tonight predicting a McAuliffe victory.
We're going to win.
While McAuliffe is linking Republican opponent businessman Glenn Youngkin to former President Trump.
I've beaten Trump twice in Virginia. Tomorrow we go 3-0.
Youngkin has not shared a campaign stage with Trump, keeping his distance while pressing McAuliffe on the school front in this ad.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
McAuliffe says his words were taken out of context. Heated culture wars in schools, now a primary issue in both campaigns, and it's galvanizing many Youngkin voters.
When you look at the politicization of schools, that just strikes me as wrong.
But Democrats tonight remain hopeful.
Coming out and just saying, we are a blue state and I would like it to stay that way is really important.
All right, Katie Beck joins us now from Richmond. Katie, you've been talking to voters, and I know you live in Virginia as well. How big was the issue of education in this race?
Well, there are so many hot-button topics facing Virginia schools right now, Tom, on the table. Critical race theory, mask mandates, transgender bathroom policies. All of these have sort of been a lightning rod of controversy in recent months, and these candidates realized that and made it a centerpiece in their campaign. In particular, Youngkin using this to really galvanize, to really motivate a base. And many voters we spoke with here today say it's working so far. We'll see what the outcome is, hopefully later tonight. Tom?
All right, Katie Beck leading us off tonight on election night. They're from Richmond. With results just starting to come in Virginia, we want to go to NBC News political director Chuck Todd and Chief White House correspondent Kristen Werkel. They'll be hosting our election coverage tonight starting at 9 p.m. Chuck, let's start with you tonight. The first exit poll showing how voters feel about the candidates. What are we learning and what stands out for you right now?
Well, look, I want to very quickly what we're learning, and these are numbers that we can now share with you now that the polls are closed, on just the basic opinion of the two candidates. You talked about with Katie there the issue of education, but what did these voters think of the two candidates? Well, here's Glenn Youngkin's fave. As you can see, that's not a bad place to be on Election Day. 53% favorable, 43% unfavorable. But when you go back here excuse me there. When you roll down here and you look at where Terry McAuliffe is, literally the reverse. 45% favorable, 52% unfavorable. And in many ways, Tom, this reflects the more negative campaign that McAuliffe ran, particularly in the last 6 weeks. Most of his TV advertising had been negative, targeting Youngkin on various things, particularly Trump. Youngkin certainly ran his share of negative ads too, but he had a few more positives on as well, and I think those numbers reflect it. Look, this doesn't mean that automatically means that Terry McAuliffe isn't going to win this race tonight. He's certainly there are people that he's clearly already overperforming his favorable rating, but that's where he went in here. And I do think it's a reminder that while there's no incumbent in this race, Terry McAuliffe being the former governor, he's the closest thing you would have to an incumbent in a race without one.
Right. He's a name Virginians know. Kristen, I want to ask you, you cover the White House. The president's approval rating is tanking. A lot of people are wondering if the Virginia race will sort of be a referendum on President Biden. What are you hearing about the White House's outlook on this contest?
Well, Tom, President Biden, traveling overseas, was asked about this race. He said, I think we're going to win. That's the same type of bravado that you hear from the White House. Privately, though, the finger pointing has begun to some extent. They say, look, this is a race that Terry McAuliffe is running. He has to take responsibility for his campaign and really trying to distance themselves from the fact that this is a tight race in a state that President Biden won by 10 points. But the reality is the point that you make, the fact that President Biden's approval rating has been tanking, the fact that there is this intransigence in Washington, the White House, a lot of Democrats like to argue that's not impacting voters. The reality is, if you talk to voters on the ground in Virginia, they say they're pretty fed up with what they're seeing right now in Washington. So we'll have to see what, if any, impact that has. But it is very difficult for us to look at this race and not draw the conclusion that to some extent what is happening in Washington will have some type of an impact. So I think it is a referendum to some extent on this president and the former president. Look at Glenn Youngkin. He has walked a very fine line. He's been endorsed by former President Trump, but he hasn't campaigned with him in person. And Chuck talked about the fact that McAuliffe is to some extent this incumbent because he's the former governor. He's been campaigning with all the big names in the Democratic Party. So he certainly looks like the insider in this race, Tom.
Yeah, and on that point, Chuck, let's talk strategy because both Democrats and Republicans will be taking notes. We saw McAuliffe was trying to tie Youngkin to Donald Trump. Youngkin's strategy was not to disavow Trump, but it wasn't really to give him a bear hug either. Based on the exit polls, did either strategy work for either candidate?
Well, first of all, I want to point out the Biden number here a little bit. If you saw, let me remind you where Terry McAuliffe's unfave was. 45 favorable, 52 unfavorable. Look at how familiar this Biden job rating looks. 45% approve, 54% disapprove. Look, I think we're starting to see that there was a bit of the environment here, clearly not good for Democrats. But look at how close. This is the Biden numbers. Now, let me show you what the opinion of voters of Donald Trump were in Virginia. 42-53. Certainly worse than Biden. But, Tom, not extraordinarily worse than Biden. Basically, Biden has now fallen down closer to Trump territory than where he was 1 year ago today when he was winning the state by double digits. So I do think that while Trump is not an asset to the Republican Party at all, I think the biggest thing that happened here, if you're Terry McAuliffe, is that Biden also didn't become an asset. And in many ways did that not quite neutralize the Trump issue, but certainly dilute the Trump issue as far as McAuliffe was concerned.
Yeah, we'll learn a lot later tonight. Kristen, at this point, it's too early to say who's on top in Virginia, but what else can viewers expect tonight from your special?
Well, we are going to delve into all of the races. Of course, there's a gubernatorial race in New Jersey. There are mayoral races all around the country that are fascinating, in Boston, in New York, in Buffalo. And a lot of those races are really going to show us the divide right now in the Democratic Party between progressives and moderates. There's a mayoral race in Minneapolis. And then there's a fascinating ballot question in Minneapolis about whether the police department should basically be replaced by a public safety department. There would still be police officers, but it would be a way of rethinking public safety to some extent, and a couple of congressional special races. Did I miss anything, Chuck?
Not at all. And Tom, though, that isn't the big picture. We are having these elections mostly in Democratic territory, right? Virginia, New Jersey, these urban areas around the country. It really is a national test of how blue is the Democratic Party. And I do think we're going to find out tonight that it perhaps the party elected officials are more progressive than the rank-and-file Democrats are.
It no doubt will be an exciting night for politics. All right, Chuck Todd and Kristen Welker, thank you so much. You guys will be breaking down all the critical state and local elections across the country tonight on Meet the Press Election Night Special. Again, that begins at 9 p.m. Eastern right here on NBC News Now. You do not want to miss that. In the meantime, President Biden on the way back to Washington after winning a pledge at the Global Climate Summit to greatly reduce emissions of methane gas. But here at home, an agreement on his sweeping social and climate spending bill is up in the air. Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has the latest from Scotland.
Tonight, declaring this the start of a decisive decade, President Biden touting significant new steps at this crucial climate conference.
I can't think of any 2 days when more has been accomplished dealing with climate than these 2 days.
Under pressure to demonstrate action, not words, the president announcing 100 countries are joining the U.S., adopting strict new environmental rules to slash emissions of methane, a potent greenhouse gas.
Methane is 25 times more toxic to the environment than CO2. So we're making real progress.
But Republicans warn it will cost energy jobs. The president tonight also responding to the ongoing drama among Democrats back at home over his $1.75 trillion social and climate spending plan. Key moderate holdout Joe Manchin calling the president's spending framework full of, quote, budget gimmicks and a recipe for economic crisis, saying he's still not on board. Manchin today.
The White House knew exactly where I stood. There was a couple concerns that we had to work through.
We asked President Biden about Manchin's criticisms.
Do you have a specific commitment from Senator Manchin to support your Build Back Better bill? Yes or no?
I'm not going to talk about the specifics of my conversations. He will vote for this. Joe will be there.
And we pressed the president about soaring prices, with inflation at a 13-year high.
So when specifically should Americans expect those prices to come down?
First of all, the significant reason why prices are up is because of COVID affecting the supply chain. And anyone who would prefer, as bad as things are in terms of prices hurting families now, trade this Thanksgiving for last Thanksgiving.
Peter joins us now from Glasgow, Scotland. Peter, your question on Joe Manchin making headlines over here. Do we know if Democrats are any closer to getting some type of deal done, or was the president's answer more wishful than anything else?
Yeah, Tom, his answer was certainly revealing, right? He would not say that he had any firm commitment from Senator Manchin to support his $1.75 trillion Build Back Better plan. And as the president heads home tonight, it's likely he returns to Washington, arriving there in the morning to a situation not too dissimilar from the one when he left. His plans have still yet to be passed. But there are some changes to his spending package taking place as we speak. Tonight, Democrats announcing an agreement that's designed to lower the cost of some prescription drugs for seniors. Tom?
All right, Peter Alexander for us tonight. Peter, thank you for that. Also on the president's mind tonight, the start of the vaccine rollout for children ages 5 to 11. The Pfizer vaccine for that age group passing a critical step today, clearing the way for millions of American children to get vaccinated. Here's NBC's Tom Costello.
The final CDC vote came late this afternoon.
I am going to take my child to get this vaccine, and I have gotten my other kids vaccinated.
The CDC's advisory committee voting unanimously to approve emergency use authorization for Pfizer's COVID vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds. Already, vials are rolling out to hospitals, pediatricians, and pharmacies nationwide. The orange caps designate children's doses, 2 shots with smaller needles, at a third of the adult dose, which comes with a purple cap.
The U.S. government has placed orders with us that basically covers every kid of this country. So I think the supply will be there, and hopefully a lot of kids will benefit from it.
The CDC reports 1.9 million known cases among 5 to 11-year-olds, 8,300 hospitalizations, and at least 94 confirmed deaths, with African-American, Hispanic, and Native American kids at 3 times the risk for hospitalization. Leading pediatricians say vaccinating this age group is critical if they are to return to a normal childhood.
There are children in second grade who have never experienced a normal school year. There are students in middle school who missed out on school sports and extracurricular activities.
Many parents have been nervous but anxious to get their children vaccinated.
I'm kind of scared a little bit, but when I did it, I was okay.
Others are worried that the vaccine hasn't been studied long enough, and some worry about extremely rare cases of heart inflammation in older children.
It's just scary because it's like, what is it? And then there's so many different ups and downs of what the vaccine does and what it doesn't do.
The first wave of 5 to 11-year-olds who received their shots could be fully vaccinated by Christmas.
I think people should realize that a choice not to get a vaccine is not a risk-free choice. It's a choice to take a different risk, and I would argue a more serious risk.
Tom Costello joins us now from Vienna, Virginia. So, Tom, now that the CDC has approved this, what's the president's plan to get those vaccines into the arms of children?
20,000 healthcare professionals have already been enlisted. They're going to be moving 15 million doses into arms. We think we could see needles going into arms. Quite literally, it could happen Wednesday, certainly by the end of the week. CVS, by the way, they're expecting their shipments will arrive later in the week, but hospitals are getting them already, Tom.
All right, Tom, so you said this is going to happen very quickly, as soon as tomorrow, possibly. What can parents expect as far as side effects are concerned?
Really minimal. And they made this point during the presentation today with the CDC advisory group. Everybody is suggesting that the side effects are very minimal. A sore arm, you may feel a little achy, maybe a slight fever, but keeping in mind that this dose is a third of the dose that you would have had if you got Moderna, Pfizer, J&J, a third of that dose. And so the side effects in children thought to be very minimal, as if they got a flu vaccine.
All right, Tom, thank you for that. Now to Los Angeles. Container trains busted open and boxes littered all over the tracks. A series of cargo heists in Southern California might be another consequence of the nation's busted supply chain, and authorities are concerned. Jo Lynn Kent has the latest from the scene.
Tonight, thieves are suspected of pilfering products off trains in California, leaving thousands of boxes tossed off Union Pacific trains and left scattered on the tracks. It may sound like the train robberies of the Wild West, but it's happening today as the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach struggle to process idling ships, adding to the already snarled supply chain in our pandemic recovery. Our NBC Los Angeles crew caught on camera several container doors swung wide open. That section of the track bordered by homeless encampments on both sides. NBC LA capturing on video these 2 individuals along the tracks, one hopping on a slow-moving train carrying what appears to be bolt cutters.
Cargo thieves and organized cargo theft groups is that they will target commodities that they know that they can sell. So they're going to hone in on those commodities that are either high in demand or shortage and harder for people to get. That way they can get a better return on the sale of it after they steal it.
Back in August, officials found $100,000 worth of merchandise taken from a Union Pacific train in a homeless encampment in Pomona, California. The Pomona police telling NBC News that cargo trains are, quote, hit continually and almost weekly. Police saying the stolen items in August appeared to be new with packaging intact, including vehicle tires, small kitchen appliances and fixtures, major appliances, auto-related parts, clothing, shoes, cleaning cleaning supplies, baby-related items, and various household items. Union Pacific issuing a statement saying they're aware of the thefts and are working with local law enforcement. The stealing comes as the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are clogged with 100 ships waiting to dock, a supply chain in crisis worldwide.
Freight at rest is freight at risk. So when you see more cargo sitting around, you're certainly going to create a bigger opportunity for cargo theft. The other major ingredients in the increase are going to be the demand and the shortages.
And the National Insurance Crime Bureau says cargo theft is likely to increase through 2021.
All right, Jolene Kent joins us tonight from Lincoln Park, Los Angeles, where more of this has happened. And Jolene, in addition to this disturbing train theft, you also have some new reporting on more slowdowns in the supply chain?
Yeah, that's right. In addition to the theft in the boxes that you see here behind me, we also know, according to the experts, that warehouse space is at a premium. In fact, warehouse vacancies have fallen to record lows here in the Los Angeles area. It's effectively sold out. So what does that mean for your stuff in the holiday season? Even if it's coming off of a port and it's coming on a container on these railways, it doesn't necessarily get to you or to your store in time because there may not be enough warehouse space. And that warehouse building, it takes time. And those warehouses, they can't go up fast enough, Tom.
All right, Jolene Kent with that new reporting, making her top story debut. Jolene, welcome to the show. Great to have you. All right, we are following developing news out of Las Vegas, where Raiders wide receiver Henry Ruggs is now facing felony DUI charges after a fiery crash left at least one person dead. NBC's Isa Gutierrez has more.
Tonight in Las Vegas, a deadly car crash. All eyes now on a young NFL star. Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver Henry Ruggs III under investigation after police say he slammed into another vehicle, killing one person. Ruggs was behind the wheel of a Corvette when he allegedly crashed into the back of a Toyota RAV4 near an intersection in Las Vegas just after 3:30 this morning. According to a statement from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, responding officers located the Toyota on fire. Fire department personnel responded and located a deceased victim inside the Toyota. Ruggs remained on scene and showed signs of impairment. He was transported to UMC Hospital to be treated for non-life-threatening injuries. It's a far cry from just 2 weekends ago when Ruggs was locking down an at-home win over the Philadelphia Eagles at Allegiant Stadium. Ruggs' attorneys say they will conduct their own investigation. In a statement, they asked everyone to reserve judgment until all the facts are gathered. Ruggs, who's 22 years old, is in his second year out of Alabama. And the Raiders saying, "We are devastated by the loss of life and our thoughts and prayers go out to the victim's family. We are in the process of gathering information and will have no further comment at this time." What does this mean for Ruggs and his future?
Well, the most pressing issue for him is going to be how to deal with a potential criminal charge. The point is someone died, and if he's considered responsible for it by law enforcement, that would be his most important concern. Forget his NFL career. Forget endorsement deals. He literally doesn't want to go to prison.
All right, very serious case right now. Isis joins us now live here in the studio. So if Ruggs is charged and convicted, what happens to him? How much time does he serve? And how does the NFL handle cases like this?
Yeah, so Tom, a DUI resulting in death is a felony. So he could face anywhere between 2 to 20 years in the state of Nevada if he is convicted. Now, as far as what the NFL does in these situations, the next step would be that Ruggs would be placed on the commissioner's exempt list. That's basically like an administrative suspension. So he would continue to get paid, but he wouldn't be traveling or playing with the team. We heard from an NFL spokesman today saying that this would not happen, though, until charges are formally filed against him.
All right, Issa, we thank you for that report. Now to a troubling trend in how one city is trying to change course. The U.S. murder rate surging during the height of the pandemic, but St. Louis is trying to curb the violence. NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt is there.
It's a distinction no city wants. Murder capital of America. The homicide rate in St. Louis was the highest in the country last year, the worst this city has seen in 50 years. Fear and crime run high downtown, pushing businesses, tourists, and families out. Late last week, gunshots rang out as Mayor Tashara Jones was giving a press conference on efforts to curb gun violence.
When I showed this video to my son, he thought that they were shooting at me. So my son should not have to carry that trauma with him on a daily basis.
Jones took office in April, born and raised in North St. Louis, all too familiar with violence.
Desensitization of gunshots in the distance is not normal, and of course this is not the St. Louis that I want any family to live in.
She made good on a campaign promise to cut the police budget, reallocating those funds to social services programs. But in the face of rising violence in recent weeks, added more officers downtown. She says the violence has gotten worse in the pandemic.
We're making intentional investments in economic justice and making sure that we're investing in neighborhoods that haven't seen investments in decades.
But the violence here is a regional worry.
She was a happy little girl, she was.
Just 2 months ago in neighboring East St. Louis, Illinois, Harriet Stringer's 3-year-old granddaughter, Kalia, was shot and killed. She was in Stringer's bedroom watching TV when a stray bullet tore through the wall.
That's when we heard some gunshots. Pow, 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 pow.
No arrests have been made, and Stringer says random gunfire continues to be a problem in her neighborhood.
Do you feel safe in your own home?
Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. People is not safe. Really, they not, because all this violence, it's got to stop. It really got to stop.
The St. Louis area hardly alone in this struggle. Last year, murders nationwide increased nearly 30% from 2019. Baltimore, Detroit, and New Orleans also among America's most violent cities.
So this become our challenge right here.
But here in St. Louis, they're focusing on finding organic solutions. Cure Violence is a city-funded program attacking the issue head-on with violence interrupters.
How do you see your role on these streets?
I see my role out here is to really meet the people where they at, the youngsters, to meet them where they at, to try to have an impact.
Many of these interrupters are ex-convicts who grew up in St. Louis. They patrol the streets, mentor high-risk community members, and engage local businesses and residents, working to anticipate where violence may occur and intervening before it does.
Our approach is one of compassion and one of empathy.
Muja Williams served nearly 30 years in federal prison. With Cure Violence, he's now dedicated to preventing the very crimes he once committed.
What motivates me to be a part of this right here is to try to clean up or try to correct or right what I have done wrong.
Introduced last June, the program is believed to have interrupted more than 400 incidents. But Williams says there's still a long way to go.
The work that Cure Violence is doing now, I believe it's going to affect the way St. Louis look 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Lester Holt joins us now from St. Louis. And Lester, I want to go back to those violence interrupters. How exactly do they work without getting hurt or even killed?
Well, you go into these neighborhoods and they build relationships, and that's really the heart of what they're trying to do right now is to predict violence, understanding the players, understanding retaliation, the nature of retaliation, and also trying to divert some of these guys in the neighborhood who may be prone to violence to give them opportunities for jobs and things that may essentially occupy their time.
It's such a great idea. And Lester, we heard from Harriet Stringer in your story there. She lost her 3-year-old granddaughter. It sounds like she feels there is no escape. What do residents want to see happen next?
Well, just from her, she simply wants the case to be resolved. She wants to find out who the person was that killed her grandchild. She has heard these shots, and she could tell me stories of other deaths in the neighborhood. There's clearly frustration, a feeling of not being heard. And more than anything, people want to be heard, and they want to see searches for solutions.
All right, Lester Holt for us tonight. Lester, thank you for that. And Lester is traveling the country all week in his special series Across America for Nightly News. Please make sure to tune in. All right, next to the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, the teenager accused of shooting and killing 2 people and wounding another during protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin last year. The case is testing the boundaries of the Second Amendment and self-defense. We want to warn you, you may find some of the images disturbing. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez in Kenosha for Top Story tonight.
Kyle Rittenhouse sat in court today, a polarizing figure, seen either as a vigilante or a hero.
The evidence will show that the only person who killed anyone was the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse.
The prosecutor arguing Rittenhouse shot and killed 2 men and wounded a third last year with an AR-15 style rifle. He says Rittenhouse was drawn to chaos like a moth to a flame. Rittenhouse was just 17 when he traveled to Wisconsin from Illinois after intense protests erupted over the shooting of Jacob Blake, a black man, by a white police officer.
Our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle.
Rittenhouse faces 6 charges, including first-degree intentional homicide, which carries a life sentence. The 20-person jury includes 8 alternates and just 1 person of color. Rittenhouse's lawyers argue he opened fire in self-defense because he was attacked in the street.
Kyle Rittenhouse protected himself, protected his firearm so it couldn't be taken, used against him or other people.
Also today, jurors heard from the prosecution's first witness, the man who's accused of buying Rittenhouse's gun.
My dad had took a lot of the weapons we had out of the safe due to all the rioting, and stashed them inside the house in case somebody were to come break into our house, and that gun happened to be one of those weapons.
Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from outside the courthouse there in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Gabe, the big question tonight, do we think Rittenhouse himself will testify?
Well, Tom, for the first time today during its opening statement, the defense revealed that Rittenhouse will testify during this trial. Of course, it's unclear when, but the trial overall is expected to last about 2 weeks. Tom, the central question right now, and we heard this from today's opening statements, is with the prosecution saying that Rittenhouse instigated that confrontation, the defense coming back and saying that he was attacked first. That will probably be the central question of this trial, Tom.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez for us. Gabe, thank you for that. Still ahead tonight, the free fall escape. The video showing a suspect crashing a stolen van on a bridge and then jumping off, how authorities finally took him down. Madagascar in crisis. We're on the ground tonight on the drought-stricken African island, now on the brink of an unprecedented famine. And the desperate search for a missing mother last seen 2 weeks ago. Mara Barrett joins Top Story Live tonight with the latest on the investigation and the potential new clues in the case we've just learned. Top Story, just getting started. Stay with us. Back now with the urgent search for a missing mother in Los Angeles. Police and her family now asking the public for help after her dog turned up without her. Her ex-husband believes she could be the victim of foul play. Here's NBC's Mara Barrett.
Tonight, new clues in the search for Heidi Plank, a Los Angeles mother last seen more than 2 weeks ago.
I miss my friend. Our #1 priority is finding Heidi.
Her dog unexpectedly discovered in this high-rise building, a dozen miles from where Plank lives in Culver City. But she's nowhere to be found.
Her son texted me and said, "Hey, have you talked to my mom? I haven't heard from her. Can you go by the house?" And I did, and she wasn't there. Her car wasn't there.
According to LAPD, Plank was last seen on this security video with her dog on October 17th on her way to her son's football game. She shares custody of the 10-year-old with her ex-husband, Jim Wayne, who she saw at the game.
She left halftime at the football game, and we haven't heard anything since.
3 days later, it was her turn to pick up her son from school, but she didn't show.
Still can't believe she didn't show. It's just that's what I'm saying. It's like, yes, I am the ex-husband, but she would have shown. So I knew at that point in time we had a serious problem.
And I've seen her with that boy. She would never, ever just leave him like that. It breaks my heart when I see him and when we all see him, because there's nothing we can say or do or say to him or promise that, hey, we're sure, baby boy, that mommy is going to be here tomorrow.
Wayne filed a missing persons report on October 20th. He says LAPD detectives found her phone and laptops left behind at her home. One of Plank's friends told NBC that she had once picked her up at the residential building where her dog was found back in 2020, but that no one knows anything more about her connection to it.
This dog was actually through 4 layers of security to get into that building. So somebody has to know something. So we need to know how the dog got in that building.
We reached out to the building's management team, who says they've been working with LAPD.
I believe some type of foul play. Something's definitely wrong. something's wrong.
All right, Maura joins us now live on set. So, Maura, I got to ask you, there's a lot of questions in this case. Why is the ex-husband so dead set on foul play happening?
Well, there's a lot of loose ends to tie up here. When I spoke with her ex-husband, Jim Wayne, there today, he told me that over the last 2 weeks since Plank has gone missing, he's received several phone calls from a man who claims to be her boss asking for her laptop. Her laptop and her phone, he says, were given to the LAPD in the investigation. They say that it is still very much an active investigation. They could not confirm certain details about the phone and the laptop, but Jim Wayne says it's no longer in his possession. Her family and friends aching tonight on the eve of her son's 11th birthday.
Yeah, clearly they are looking for a lot of answers. All right, Maura, we thank you for that. Coming up, outrage at George Washington University after police say vandals ransacked a Jewish fraternity house and destroyed a Torah scroll. The hate crime investigation now underway. And hailstorm slammed the new images tonight from Bolivia. Crews now working to clear thousands of tons of ice from the street. Stay with us. Wow. All right, now to Top Stories news feed, and we begin in Florida with the dramatic end to a police chase. Check this out. Aerial footage from the Lee County Sheriff's Office shows the moment a suspect crashed a stolen van into a bridge in Fort Myers. The suspect then climbing over the bridge's security barrier to escape deputies and plunging 55 feet into the river below. He then attempted to swim away, but deputies on a boat managed to corner him and pull him out of the water. The suspect, identified as 34-year-old Brian Gray, he was taken to the hospital. He is now in custody. The hate crime investigation in Washington after a Torah was destroyed at a fraternity house. Fraternity members and supporters holding a rally at George Washington University Monday night. Police say the Tau Kappa Epsilon house had been vandalized and a Torah scroll was found ripped and soaked in laundry detergent. The university's president calling it a serious act of hate and said anti-Semitism will not be tolerated. Carol Baskin, you may remember her. She's the star of the Netflix series Tiger King. She's now suing the streaming service. The animal rights activist trying to stop Netflix from featuring her and her husband in the show's upcoming second season. The couple saying they only agreed to appear in one season of the show. All right, we want to turn now to climate change and the climate crisis as world leaders gather in Scotland to discuss the warming planet. Our Carrie Sanders sat down with noted scientist Dr. Sylvia Earle before she left for the summit herself. For decades, she's been warning the climate is changing, and now she believes people are finally listening.
The world's oceans and powerful currents, one of the most significant drivers of the weather, be it droughts that have led to a fire season that some experts fear is now year-round, to the frequent and destructive hurricanes and typhoons. A storm's power is fueled by warm water, and in the last 5 years, portions of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans have hit their highest recorded temperatures ever. Oceans absorb 90% of greenhouse gases.
Are we in trouble? Yes, we are in trouble as a species right now, 21st century.
Is this of our making?
Yes, and the fact that we know should be cause for not just hope, but celebration. That we know we're in trouble.
Dr. Sylvia Earle, famed oceanographer.
There was a whale that we got to know in Alaska.
In the 1960s and 70s, the now 84-year-old was trying to warn us. Her work with whales profiled in 1977 here on NBC News. You said 44 years ago, they're confronted with a new enemy.
They're confronted with a new enemy, and we are that enemy.
Are we still that enemy? Are we listening to you?
Well, ignorance is the enemy. Once people really know, you can know and not care, but you cannot care if you don't know.
Dr. Earle visited Florida International University this week, sharing her life's research with a younger audience, demanding attention to climate change. Tonight, she's at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Scotland. She will again share with politicians that sea life is dying, that data projects ocean temperatures will continue to climb unless worldwide carbon emissions are reduced. But when you look at the models, we're heading to that tipping point, are we?
Yes, we are, but we need it to be a turning point rather than a tipping point.
Coral reefs killed by increasing water temperatures. North Atlantic right whales in search of colder waters entangled and sometimes drowning in lobster trap lines. All signs, Dr. Earl says, no nation can continue to ignore.
The temperature of the planet is shaped largely by the flow of water, distributing heat and cold from the polar areas, from the middle equatorial areas. It's one big interacting system, but the most important thing to know is it's alive.
The challenge for the United States and economies around the world is paying for a switch to non-carbon producing energy. But experts say the real cost is if we don't. Tom?
Carrie Sanders for us. Carrie, thank you for that. Now we turn to the devastating human impact of climate change. Madagascar now on the brink of famine. Children are starving. Sky News' Alex Crawford traveled there where she witnessed up close the deadly consequence of the island nation's historic drought.
Climate change is killing, and Malalaza is one of Madagascar's younger victims. She's barely got the strength to turn her head. She's the weight of a typical newborn. She's actually a year and 2 months old, with few reserves to fight disease. She's now got tuberculosis, but is too weak to cry and protest very much. She's living and slowly dying in the country likely to go down in history as the first to suffer from a climate change famine. The health workers have few weapons to fight this environmental war, and without a shot being fired, they're seeing suffering on a huge scale, and they are losing. With the bulk of the country so poor, they're struggling to get enough to eat. The weekly clinic in Abavombi is crowded with mothers and hungry children with acute malnutrition. Here, a swollen stomach is the sign of suffering and hunger. Nearly 90% of the country live below the poverty line, earning less than $2 a day. They're one of the poorest countries in the world. Soja's lusty crying's a good sign. It means the little girl's strong enough to fight. And a small victory. She's gained weight. Her mother smiles for the first time. I'm very happy, she tells us. The young are the most vulnerable. Madagascar is struggling after years of failed or poor crops caused by the worst drought in decades. And this aid is their only hope of survival. They give thanks to the aid agencies. The lack of water has had a knock-on effect, with poor sanitation increasing and ramping up disease. Every day's a fight to eat and to live. And these are the ones who've made it to the main southern city and help. But in this, one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, many of the waterways have dried up completely in the Grand Sud region, leaving people digging holes in the sandy riverbed.
It looks like just miles and miles of sand, but all of this is actually a riverbed, the Manambova River in Seshombe region in the south of Madagascar. The worst drought they're seeing here in about 40 years. This is meant to be the rainy season. The dry season doesn't start for another 3 more months.
There's very little infrastructure, with mostly unpaved roads and many communities extremely remote, so what aid there is difficult to deliver. The extreme weather includes multiple yearly cyclones and dust storms, making subsistence farming even tougher, and people are becoming more and more desperate. These young herdsmen didn't want to be interviewed. But picking up rocks and waving their farming tools, they demand money to let us through, and then sit down in front of our vehicles and refuse to budge until we do. Our Malagasy colleagues begin negotiations as the herdsmen tell them they're hungry and they need money for food. Our drivers reluctantly hand over cash. When we reach Marofu, the village elder in orange is appalled at the attempted hold-up. Raids on the meagre crops are on the rise here. He's anxious to show us how malnourished the children are, and many are showing signs of acute malnutrition. This is what they've been reduced to eating: cactus flowers, which are devoured very quickly. They offer some relief from hunger pangs, but they will bloat their bellies and cause cramps later. Many have blistered lips and the wizened skin of those 3 times their age. Of course these are not enough for us, but we've no choice, Hariba tells us. No one has electricity here. Only 15% of the country does, so many live in medieval conditions. Rohoniswa has 2 wives and 2 large families with a total of 16 children to feed. I can't ever fill these bowls with enough food for them, he says, and we're always hungry, but I watered the rice down to make it go further. He shows us his second home a few yards away. He's trying to make stuffing for mattresses. But he's not sold anything, so they'll eat cactus flowers again, he says. The village elder insists on escorting us out. His instincts are correct. The herdsmen have been waiting for us to leave on the single track out. The young men are scolded as they protest they need help. Everyone is hungry. Madagascar has contributed virtually nothing to the world's annual carbon emissions, but is probably the worst affected country, and its people are crying out for change. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Madagascar.
And we thank Alex Crawford and her team for that powerful report. Now to Top Stories Global Watch, and we begin with an ISIS bombing outside of a military hospital in Kabul. At least 7 people are dead, including a child, and over a dozen injured. Taliban officials saying they did prevent the attackers from breaching the hospital itself. It's the latest in a surge of violent attacks carried out by ISIS fighters since the Taliban took over Afghanistan this summer. And from our Americas reporting, a major hailstorm hitting southern Bolivia. New video showing the city of Tarija covered in white. You can see it there all on the ground with more than 4 feet of hail falling in some areas. Officials saying crews have cleared more than 5,000 tons of ice from the streets. Luckily, no injuries reported. And when we come back, Jetpack mystery. Investigators looking into a series of jetpacking sightings over Los Angeles, but now they say new images are leading to a different theory about what might be in the sky. Stay with us. Back now with the mystery sightings in the sky that have baffled the Los Angeles area for months now. Pilots reporting several instances of jetpacks flying near passenger planes. But tonight, new video from the LAPD is sucking the air out of those theories. It shows a massive Halloween balloon that may explain the sightings. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer with that video and this report.
They were the sightings that sparked countless conspiracy theories last fall. Fears of jetpacks flying near passenger planes.
Fictional aircraft use caution, jetpack rocket, and has been reported.
Several reports of an unidentified person crisscrossing the skies near LAX.
We just saw the guy pass by us jetpack.
The proliferation of personal flying devices allowing more people to play daredevil, fueling the amateur sleuths in pointing to a rogue jetpack flyer. But tonight, new images released by the Los Angeles Police Department deflating those theories. This video, captured by an LAPD helicopter, appears to show a life-size balloon floating through the sky near LAX, possibly an inflatable Jack Skellington from the movie The Nightmare Before Christmas. Authorities now believe those images, recorded last November, could help explain a series of sightings around the same time last year.
Only in LA.
The first was in August of 2020 from the cockpit of an American Airlines plane.
Tower, American 1997. We just passed a guy in a jetpack. American 1997, okay, thank you. Were they up to your left side or right side?
Off the left side, maybe 300 yards or so, about our altitude.
Then in October, pilots aboard a China Airlines flight approaching LAX spotted something out of their windows.
We just saw the flying object like a flight suit just passing by at 6,000.
A flying object, was it a UAV or was it a jetpack?
Like a jetpack, too shiny, too fast.
The FAA investigated both sightings and several others, but said radar tapes showed no indications of a jetpack in the air at the time of the sightings.
When you talk to the manufacturers of the jetpacks, what they say is they don't have a lot of fuel reserve. So the idea that they're flying around this high and sort of lingering on this leisurely flight that high above the ground seems doubtful.
Tonight, the FAA won't officially confirm what was seen in the air was a balloon. So technically, Tom, the mystery in the air continues. Tom, back to you.
It definitely deepens. All right, Miguel, thank you. Coming up, the bride who dreamed of standing eye to eye next to her groom, pulling off the ultimate surprise and making her own wish come true. You may want to grab the tissues. Finally tonight, a bride surprise. Doctors told Chelsea Hill she would never walk again, but Chelsea had her own set of plans. It stunned not only her guests, but also the man she loves. It's the day 29-year-old Chelsea Hill had dreamed of, the picture-perfect wedding. She's been through some tough times, paralyzed from the waist down when she was just 17, a passenger in a drunk driving accident. But on her wedding day, Chelsea was determined to actually walk down the aisle, a moment no one expected, and one that brought every guest to their feet.
It was hard for me. It was a lot harder than I thought, but I don't know, I just kept looking at him.
Him is Jay Bloomfield, her fiance. His job is fitting people with wheelchairs. So to witness this took his breath away.
So the moment when she walked down the aisle was something I'll never forget. It was an absolute complete surprise.
Since the accident, Chelsea has used a wheelchair, but that hasn't stopped her from pursuing her passion for dance. In 2012, she founded the Rollettes, a wheelchair-based dance team. Last year, Chelsea got a pair of full leg braces, custom fitted, allowing her to stand up.
Hi guys, I'm standing.
All in anticipation of this moment, so she could walk down the aisle and say, I do.
I want to do something I always dreamed of, stand eye to eye with you.
It just blew me away to see her strength and her ability to stand there the whole time through the entire ceremony, the vows, the exchanging of the rings, etc. It was breathtaking.
But that's not where this story ends. Their first dance was also her first one standing since the accident.
He knew I had the leg braces on, so I was like, yeah, we're gonna stand. He's like, okay, we're gonna stand. So none of that was planned. It was really just like kind of winging it, and it worked out really well.
Not a dry eye at the wedding or across the world. The Instagram reel getting more than 100,000 views. Chelsea putting into words what everyone else was feeling.
It was just so magical just to be able to have that moment. You know, as a wheelchair user, you don't get that like full body hug or that heart to heart feeling all the time. So when you do get it, it's just that much more special.
Magical is right. We thank Chelsea for sharing that moment and being so brave. And we thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.